So we all are more or less familiar with these two terms, comics and graphic novel, but many of us do not have the idea of the distinction between these two terms. So today in this video I'll discuss the basic distinction or difference between comics and graphic novel. So let's get started. First, the concept of comics. So the birth of the genre of comics came in 19th century with the publication of The Yellow Kid by Richard Outcault in America. So later on it got so popular that we have the concept of graphic novel derived. So the reason why it got so popular, it all lies in semiotics, the concept that Ferdinand de Saussure gave. So the novel and the comics and graphic novel, there is a subtle difference and important difference. That is, when we read word only, we may think of anything we like, we can picture ourselves anything, but when in comics we get picture and also the word, it gives an exact idea of what author is trying to make or trying to suggest or trying to make his reader to think of. So it makes connection between authors and readers thinking, and it doesn't divert readers imagination, it actually blocks the free imagination of the reader. So when we say weapon, it could be anything like sword, like gun and knife. So when the author writes the enemy was killed by a weapon, and his pictures, or he gives a picture of a gun, so the reader understood that the enemy was killed by a gun, not knife or sword. So this is what exact thinking or image gives on reader's mind. So that's why this thing, comics and graphic novel, got so popular later on. Now when the word comics comes, we have also certain patterns of reading comics, and in comics L. Eisner, first he talks about the sequential, the importance of sequence in comics. We must maintain the sequence. We have panel like here, and between two panel we have a little space that is known as gutter. It actually suggests that we are shifting to different panel or speech balloon. This is called speech balloon, what the character is thinking or saying to other characters, and this is called text box, and this is actually narration of the author, and it also gives context, different context, what we come to know about the context if it changes. MC McLeod, in his book Understanding Comics, he gives the definition of comics step by step. So he says finally that comics is juxtapose pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence, intended to convey information or to produce an aesthetic response in the reader. So the word sequence is again mentioned. Now the graphic novel, the definition of graphic novel, we find that a fictional story presented in a comic strip format and published as a book. So if we break up the distinction, is that comic is like a serial. You think of comics as a serial and graphic novel as a movie. So graphic novel is a complete book, so it differs on how they are published. The story in comics released in parts, while graphic novels are released as a whole. In newspaper we get the comics part by part, and it could be long, so long. And also comics often have a light comedy feel. When the word comics comes, what comes to our mind? Comics and comedy, these two words are like a synonymous term. So comics often have a light comedy feel, while graphic novels offer mature and serious themes aiming at youngs and adults, like political theme, political issues, social issues. We also find that the famous graphic novel Moss by Art Spiegelman, it actually shows the experience of Holocaust of the author's father, delineation of the pain and agony and the brutality and the atrocities of human being, what the German people did to the Jews, how Jews were dragged to death, they are tortured. So from the concept of comics, this graphic novel later derived, and this is the main difference. Also there is also another difference, that is the storyline. in comics can begin at any point of the story, while the graphic novel follows the typical pattern of novels, that it involves or it entails a beginning, middle, and an ending. So this is the main difference. And you just think of graphic novel as a movie and comics as a serial, then you will get the difference. And because of this semiotics that we talked about earlier, this thing became so popular in even today postmodern era. That is why from this concept of comics we got the graphic novel. Otherwise authors or writers wouldn't have to take this genre as their instead of they could write a novel, but they took the genre of comics as a form to write to show up, to showcase the social issues, political issues and other things.